to another Coffee with Samso, where we speak with ASX companies and the guys who run the show, and we talk about what they've been doing. We're here at the UWA Club here in Crawley, and I've got Andrew Radonjic back with us to give us an update on what Venture Minerals is doing. Venture Minerals is a company who has the Mount Lindesay tin tungsten project, the Thor project, and Kulin, and also the Golden Grove North project. Code is VMS. The market cap at the moment is about 98 million. Share price about 6 cents. So, Andrew, welcome back. And lots of things have been happening for you guys. Most notably, your joint venture partner in Thor, your Julimar project is drilling. So maybe you can start with that.
Well, it's good to be back again, Noel. It's been a little while, but we just had the good news that our joint venture partner down at on our Southwest project in Chalice Mining started their maiden drilling program. So, following up the priority conductors, they hit about 11 bedrock anomalies from their ground EM survey, which they completed late last year. And we're looking forward to seeing those results come out over the coming months.
So I mean, it's almost a fully fledged joint venture now. They've committed to drilling. I guess you had some parameters that they had to meet. So looks like it's all good to go in that project.
Well, look, the exciting part for us was that obviously there's these walk-up drill targets, which we had before. We had these airborne EM anomalies, but we drilled it based on the airborne, but the ground EM gives you much more specific and better targeting data. So we got some. What's interesting is that three of our holes were very close to the bedrock conductors, and they're going to follow that up. So which means we're pretty close, which you'd expect, but that's the sort of short-term part of the targets, but. We've got a very good land package there. Our Thor anomaly, which Chalice are called the Julimar lookalike, and you look at the mag and you see very, very, very similar sort of shaped magnetic anomalies, and we've got chrome-rich rocks, which are a great host for these copper, nickel, PGE targets like at Julimar, but the thing about it is that the bottom 6.5 kilometres is we can only do airborne EM anomaly on that because there's power lines, there's a telephone transmitter tower there, and sort of the top 13, 14 kilometres is virtually untested in terms of EM, and that's why the commitment to do a very large scale auger program by Chalice, to develop new targets is pretty exciting, and we know that we've got some. One of our tenements has got two talc prospects, which talc comes from ultramafics, so there's wetted ultramafics, but because it's wetted, the mag signature has been masked by the weathering and that alteration. So we know there's ultramafics in the area, but some of it's going to be easier to find than other bits, and obviously we need that sort of high chrome, magnesium rocks to provide the great host you need for these sort of copper, nickel, PGE type targets. So we're looking at the longer term targets to be developed, as well as the early shots, which is what the joint ventures are designed around. Have a crack at these targets, which is what Chalice are doing. But there's a much longer term commitment. So certainly we expect them to go through the 51% milestone and hopefully towards 70, and then venture will be free carried up to that point, and we can make a decision if they found, something significant, then we can make a decision to hold our 30% equity position, which is, a pretty exciting opportunity. But obviously, we're riding on, I suppose, on their IP, on the back of their IP, and hopefully they're going to use that to find another discovery down at Thor.
I mean, when we did that video where we talked about Thor prior to Chalice doing any work there. I mean, it was quite obvious that you had the geology and you had to me anyway, it was a no-brainer that Chalice would enhance that and have targets that from their work anyway. So exciting times. I think that's going to be the development for a while, I believe. Their work's going to create even more targets.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's what we look forward to. Now, look, to find two deposits that are exactly the same will be a rare thing indeed, and each one has its own nuances, if you like. But I think to have an independent group, we originally had VMS targets there, and clearly there's that side of things. But by us hitting some nickel and copper bearing sulfides, and we know there's like I said, ultramafics in the area. It's really about trying to pin that down and trying to pin the geology down. Where when you're talking about the area, it's had very little work in it, and that's I suppose is the exciting opportunity. And they'll learn that, and it's good to have, I suppose, Chalice spending their dollars on the ground and developing something, whilst Venture gets on with Mount Lindsay and doing the good work there on our more advanced project.
Well, speaking of Mount Lindsay, I mean, I see an announcement that you've put people in place. So then you spoke about the upcoming feasibility study that you guys are going to be proceeding with. Can you update us? What stage that is at, and then maybe let us know what the process would be going forward on that.
Well, look, we're very fortunate to have got a very experienced mining engineer with experience in various commodities, including tin, and more focused on underground. But Glenn Van Vleeman's got the great experience for this stage we're at here in getting the study done. So he's sitting there looking at obviously we've got up and running with the drilling on the feasibility drilling or metallurgical drilling we've been doing, and that's now completed. And we've got some as you'd expect, some fantastic intersections of tin and tungsten, both in the main skarn or McDonald chute, high-grade McDonald chute, or Radford chute, which is the high-grade chute in the number 2 zone. So I think we had 21 metres at 1.2% tungsten. These are pretty good intersections, and that one's pretty close to true width as well, because of the fact the axis is a bit more challenging there on the number 2 skarn. But have him come on board. Obviously, we've got BHM processing consultants already there. We've got Jeff Barros back again, the manager of metallurgy for us originally on the original Mount Lindsay study, and he's the guy who got commissioned to work that gave us this breakthrough in terms of simplifying the flow sheet. That breakthrough test work we did right at the end after the BFS was done. We were trying to clean up the tin concentrate because we had this contaminant called tungsten in there, about 3% tungsten. So, and we came up with that great result where we actually managed to separate the two using electrostatic separation. So Jeff's back, and he provides that connection between what was done historically. So we're not starting from scratch. We're leveraging off a heap of work we did. We processed 3 tonne of sample, and BHM will now be going around, fresh pair of eyes, but a combination of fresh and experienced or old pair of eyes on the project, more specifically Mount Lindsay, will allow us to move forward. And so we're looking, we're pretty excited about the opportunities that may arise out of that. So having Jeff, so we're going to have this blend of experience and like I said, fresh eyes, and Glenn being experienced mining engineer. So we'll look at the mine design, the geotech, review that. Everything will be reviewed, but we've obviously got a great base of knowledge, having already spent something like $35-40 million on the project. But this time we've collected about 10 tonne of samples. So the last one we had 3 tonne. So we'll have plenty of sample to do, not only the work we could do for the PFS, leading into hopefully putting that out later this year is what our target is, and we'll probably inform the market when Glenn's managed to get all that schedule out. But that looks achievable at this stage. But we'll have enough sample to go into the BFS or DFS stage, which will be next year. So that, plus we've got a resource development geologist. She's come on board. So they've all been. We've just come from a site visit there. So obviously it's great having a look on the screen what these things look like, but getting on the ground and having a look at the core and the work that's been done on terrain and what challenges and opportunities that they may present. So we are on top of a hill, so the great thing is that gravity is of great assistance, and that's obviously a big way of sort of being more economic or getting your costs down in terms of underground mining. So yeah, look, it's we've been up and running on this, I suppose, since September, October last year with the drilling, but that's completed, and now we're back on the exploration. But now the technical work's happening the engineers, the metallurgists are working on that. So, you expect some news flow on that work as it comes to light.
Because you guys have done it was a BFS you've done before, wasn't it? But it was obviously a different concept, different timing, pricing, everything else. And going to the new feasibility studies, are there any sort of things that may have, a couple of things, were there anything concerns from that study that now, because you're doing, you got more information, you're going underground, that now you're going, hey, we've learned, we know that's actually now positive, or are there any things that you could see here that could throw a spanner in the works for your, this study?
Yeah, look, well, for us, the big difference is obviously between open pit and underground. So I didn't think we'd saw, we had a fairly, conventional flow sheet last time. So it wasn't like we were sort of, and I suppose the new work we did, what we're doing now is we're following up essentially like a cited test on concentrate. So we don't know how that's going to translate into the the bigger scale. There's always that yes, okay, that technique work. Now we're going to put through much larger volumes of material and go through and see what's going to work, what's not going to work. So that's obviously, there's a risk component there. But having said that, we've got a conventional flow sheet to go back to if need be. So that's the backstop, if you like. Yep. So I suppose that could be a risk. The underground, we're doing a fully concentrated underground mine design. So, we've had a look at scoping level type works, and looks all right first pass. Again, when you go and do things in more detail, do you come up with risks? The geotechnical side of things, we've identified. There's a big fault that runs through the zone and sort of puts a 40-metre displacement. So, Glenn looked at it. Oh, we've got 4 deposits. Said no, we've only got 2. It's just got a big fault through it, so it comes through and there's quite a good lateral displacement. Is there any water in that? These are the sort of risks you manage in an open pit versus an underground. There might be some challenges there, but I don't think there's anything there which is untoward. And having some experience like Glenn. And working with, having run his own consultancy firm previously, he understands, the other side of the business as well. So, he'll select someone which is, competent, get the A team involved there and try and come up with designs around this. And like I said, and look at, the opportunities that may, and Glenn's very much into innovation. So I'm pretty excited about, what opportunities we're going to use there. But the reason we went underground was to try and minimise the footprint. So we've gone from 200 hectares down to 77 hectares, and then they'll go down to 33 hectares because we'll have some temporary, rock storage facility for the waste rock and for the tailings, whilst we create those voids or holes underground, and then we use the paste fill plant to start putting that back down the hole. So, at the end of the day, you're only talking about, essentially when you rehabilitate everything, you'll just be left with the mill, and hopefully the exploration we're doing now has found something else, so we can go beyond that sort of 7-8 year mine life and come with a new discovery. So that that's why we're exploring now, because by the time you drill these things out, get all the permitting done, all the test work, etc. You need to be ready to have something to go into the mill, in 7 or 8 years down the track. Sort of. Look, I don't see anything untoward. It's essentially the test work. Hopefully it yields a flow sheet, which is what Jeff saw from that results of that work, which he said was a game changer back in 2014.
I guess it's early stage for you guys to. I mean, you can pinpoint or highlight certain possibilities, but it's really hard to put your finger on it, I guess. With the current resource that you have, is that sort of enough? I mean, obviously, you touch on the fact that you need to keep drilling away, because resources don't just happen overnight, and you work in parallels like everybody does, right? You work in parallels. So the future is obviously the exploration drilling that you talk about, the future resource adding. Is that what you have now robust enough? Because obviously, what was open cut before, and you're underground now, is it robust as it is, with a bit of touch here and there?
Well, look, certainly, we look at, have we got enough drilling to do the underground, and certainly for the pre-feasibility, there's no doubt. There's areas we've got, 15 by 20 metre spacing. It's, when you go look at the drill pad, there's just these holes that close together. There's just all these pipes sticking out. It's almost like, because it starts getting so deep, it gets hard to do the infield drilling. And certainly the idea is that high grade core, we did the higher density drilling to reduce the risk. So whether we'll need any more is debatable. I would think not, but obviously with Glenn's fresh pair of eyes, he might have some other requirements to do, might identify the odd hole we need to do to de-risk even further. But what'll be interesting is re-optimising at the prices that are today. This is not 23,000 like it was back in the study we did in 2012. It's more, we're talking about 43,000. So that's a spot price. We won't be using the spot price, but we'll have various prices we will use. So we'll probably use something around mid-30s at this stage, depending, unless the tin price continues to go up. Then
it was 48 not long ago.
That's exactly right. So if it starts getting 60 or 70,000, but we'll probably take sort of 20-25% off that price. But it's been at 40. We've been in the 40s for a while now, so we're getting used to the 40s. We got used to the 30s 12 months ago. So the 50s are a possibility for sure. And I think you look at that. So you've got the high grade zone. It's a scarce. You've got these halos of different minerals, different recoveries, but our stopes is kind of got this grade boundary, but there's actually, as we lower the cut-off with different techniques, you do actually get quite a large number of tonnes. So even though we had 13 million tonnes in the open pit reserves and 1 million tonnes underground, we've identified, we told the market we're focusing on this 4.7 million tonnes of higher grade material running around about 0.3, 0.4, I think it's 0.4, 10.3 tungsten, and a 15% mass rock and magnetite. So that's what we'll focus on. But when we optimise it, it might be a different number. It might be somewhere in between the 4 and the 13, 14. We might get 7 or 8, and then all of a sudden we might be talking about 1 million tonnes per annum for 7 or 8 years. We might be talking about 750,000 tonnes for 10 years. So those combinations we don't know about. We were thinking, when we were looking at the scoping study, which we didn't complete, but we were looking at sort of 500,000 tonnes per annum for 7 or 8 years, looking at that 3.5 to 4 million tonnes. But we were looking at half the price. So it'll be interesting to see what those numbers come back with, and what sort of methods we can use. Obviously, very keen to explore, with the electrification of underground equipment using batteries, explore that avenue as much as possible. And see what we come up with. So look, Glenn's very much into innovation. So an innovation that generates cutting costs. Obviously, the much simpler processing technique will provide cost-cutting opportunities. Gravity is a lot cheaper than flotation. So we get that cost down, and all of a sudden it has a much bigger impact on the reserve. So we expect over the next 6 months to get those numbers and model those scenarios, and it's the ore body. When you do a study for the first time, you get a couple of scenarios done, but as you do more work, this will be about modelling different scenarios. It'll give us, hopefully it'll reduce the number of options we're thinking at the moment right down for the DFS. And that's what a PFS is all about.
Because as you speak there, you reminded me, when you guys were doing the feasibility back in 2012, I think the maximum tin price was, if I'm not mistaken, no more than 23, 24 was the high. So your feasibility would have been a lot lower. So if you did it at 15,000, I don't know what the figure was, I can't remember. But you're talking about 35 mid pricing now, which is not at spot, right? So it's kind of if you as a potential shareholder, you look back at the margin is a lot bigger now than before. We're more efficient than before. So the cost may have been high, but the efficiency is greater as well. So I guess that all will get penned out in your studies when it comes out. a thought came to me also. All your other commodities, or all your other potential metals or minerals, could you recover that along with your tin, your tungsten? You spoke about magnetite. Could they then become a credit to the process, or is that just a bit too small, insignificant? You don't worry about it, just focus on the tin.
Well, look, for us, there's plenty of tin and tungsten, so they contribute almost equally to the revenue. So they're co-products. The magnetite's around about 15 to 20% of the story. So we've done all the work. We know we've got a Savage River type of circuit. So Savage River is Australia's only magnetite mine. So we'd signed back in 2011 an MOU. So all the work we did previously, we would produce a product that would go straight into their pellet plant at Port Ladder on the north coast. So we know we can do that. So that's done, that part of the circuit. And the tungsten, we've done all the recovery work, and we know that gravity works, because you see some of the pictures of the big clumps of scheelite that's in the core. So it's very coarse. So that's a good result. The recoveries on that are, I think from memory, around about the 70-odd%, 70 to 70. Actually, so more like 80%. So for the tungsten, the tin's around the 70-odd%. So we can recover that. What we did have before in a much larger volume, big tons, in the 1.75 million tonne per annum throughput for the open pit scenario we did the BFS on previously. We had about 0.1% copper, and we managed to get, and it was worth having a copper circuit on it. Debatable whether we have a copper circuit on the smaller plant. So that's something we have our eye on, but that really depends upon the throughput rates and whether it's economic enough to extract. But we were able to previously do enough work to see if we could do a bulk sulphide float and generate a copper con, albeit lower recoveries. But if someone's going to give you, I think we were getting about almost 1,000 tonnes of copper metal in concentrate per annum, as a byproduct, and you'd take it, wouldn't you? So those opportunities exist. It's a skarn, so whether any other minerals exist, it's something we continue to look at. Skarn deposits can generate other opportunities. So we continue to keep our eyes wide open to see if there's anything else in the flow sheet that we can get out of. But for example, the Nui Phao, which is one of the largest tungsten mines in the world, has fluorspar, bismuth, gold, copper, as well as tungsten. So it's sort of, that's five products, and that's been in operation for 8 years or so. So that's a good, more recent example of what it can do. But we're sticking with probably those main, tin, the tungsten, the magnetite. And the magnetite does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of the costs. It's important we recover all those components, and everything else we'll assess as we go along.
Because it's a good point that you brought up there, because you guys haven't done a lot of work outside of the tin tungsten metals in terms of drilling, right? In our last video, we sort of briefly talked about potential other metals in the Mount Lindesay project, not necessarily where the Mount Lindesay tin tungsten project is. Since then, I mean, have you guys looked at that? Because you got a great big skarn, and so you've got all the cooking facilities you need. As you mentioned just then, that what that can produce is a bit of an unknown unless you go looking for it, right?
Well, yeah, that's correct. And look, maybe the exploration will yield some of that. We don't know, but quite often you get these proximal skarns which are near the heat source, which is a granite, Meredith granite, which is, and certainly if you're too close, the tin sits in these borates, which is not recoverable by, we recover the cassiterite, the tin oxide, which is, and we get in the BFS we get 90% of the 80%. That's why our recovery is at 72%. So we did quite well in the cassiterite, and let me tell all your followers here that a lot of tin projects have be very discerning about the metallurgy, and that's a big aspect. Tin tends to get into a lot of different minerals. So for us, the metallurgy is super important, and we bought a $10,000 or $12,000 microscope on day one to make sure that tin was in a recoverable form and it's separate from other things. And we've got a low sulfide system. A lot of our iron is in the magnetite and oxide rather than the sulfide. We don't have a lot of sulfide, but if your tin sits, for example, can get mixed up with chalcopyrite, which Renison is called stannite. And Renison has a little bit of that. Most of their tin is finer grained, it's cassiterite, but when you look at their deposit, it's quite a massive sulfide. It's a fair bit of pyrrhotite. Other projects may have something like wood tin. There's tins in different species. It can be fine grain. It can't be recoverable. So recovery is a big issue. So we spend a lot of effort in that. But as I'll diverge a little bit, but that's the proximal skarns, and then all of a sudden you have these distal skarns, and that project in Portugal, is it Neves Corvo, is a tin skarn there next to a zinc deposit. So again, it's an example that as you get closer or further away, depending what you find, you might find that as we get further away from the heat source, we might actually have zinc or silver type opportunities. So the problem is that the granite sort of slopes away, so it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So you've got to be careful about that, and obviously we're going to focus on the shallower stuff first, and maybe some of these other EM targets along strike. We've got that EM target which we drilled in hole 338, and we think the granite's done this. As an apophis comes up, like a big pimple of granite popped up, and we've got sulfides in that skarn, that pyroxene pyrrhotite skarn, which is usually in the halo around the cassiterite. So we're pretty excited about following up hole 338, and that will happen in the coming months. But if you look at that scenario, that is exactly the same as Renison. Renison's got the Pine Hill granite. They've named it as being separate, but actually when you look deeper down, and there's a seismic survey to prove that, it's the same source as Mount Lindsay. So the same tin is sourced from the Meredith granite, which gets deeper and deeper, and then there's a large apophis called Pine Hill granite, and Renison's all around that particular granite. That's around that sort of, close to the contact, and that's the reason. But you got about three ore types, strata bound and carbonate replacement, and so that's and more default hosted mineralisation at Renison. But it's also in a different host rock. But it's interesting that we are sort of at one time related. We've got a different host rock. But I see many opportunities, as well as the fact we've got the Renison mine sequence going into our ground, and we're testing that at the moment. So it's sort of it's exciting to see. So I'm eyes wide open, Noel, in terms of this area. Skarn deposits are complex, but provide a lot of opportunities, and providing, of course, your met's good, then you continue to look for that. And we've also got a whole heap of ultramafics sitting in another rock sequence parallel, which is the Wilson River ultramafics, and we've got some EM targets sitting on that. So when the time comes, we'll hopefully later this year we'll start putting some holes into those to test for potential nickel targets. So and let's not forget about Avery being basically a skarn deposit sitting just south of us, which seems to be getting a bit of a new lease of life. And someone's looking to start it up again. I think a company which John Lamb's involved. I've forgotten the name of the company now, but they've just recently acquired that asset. So that's the west coast of Tasmania. There's a great history, 140 years of mining, great variety of deposits. There's VMS deposits, skarn deposits. There's got obviously Australia's highest grade tungsten mine on King Island, just off the coast there. So, absolutely keep our eyes wide open for many opportunities, not only within the flow sheet we have, but also within exploration.
Because as we all know, mineral exploration in geology, the biggest component that you require is a heat source of some sort, and you obviously have that heat source, and if you've got ultramafics sitting around, and it's possibilities is interesting. I wouldn't say endless, but interesting, right? Because you got the heat source, you got the right cooking material, the ultramafics, nickel, whatever,
Our challenge will be prioritising, as always,
that's right.
and then and that's why we've got 48 EM targets. I've got 12 priority ones. We'll work through those first, but which one actually yields? We'll hopefully it all yield, but that doesn't quite happen that way. But hopefully by spending good time on mapping and surface sampling and using geophysics and different techniques of geophysics, we can sort of prioritise the targets, because to try and bring that discovery forward in time. That's our goal, and hopefully we'll be able to make find another tin mine. We are in Australia's best tin district. We've got Australia's only tin mine in Renison Bell. Fantastic, world-class deposit. So we are confident that with time we will yield another Australia's next tin discovery.
I mean, I don't know whether I've mentioned this in the previous video, but I did do a Samso Insight before, and I was blown away. I didn't realise how tin-focused Western Tasmania is, where Ransom Bell is. It's you get tin in other parts of Australia, but it's sort of really the mecca of tin, and I guess you got all the cooking system there. That's probably one of the reasons why. And also, I've always said that you guys, that Mount Lindesay was the main game, and I've said this quite publicly in Twitter and things like that. Because you got tin and you got tungsten, and tungsten, I just checked the pricing. I think it's 345 MTU, which is when the whole market got excited when he tipped over the 400 mark. Yep. 2012, 11, somewhere around
around
there.
about the same time as when tin went up.
Yeah. So, and I guess my question to you is, tungsten has always been a slow mover. It's hidden behind the pricing, is very sort of dark, but it is a critical metals. Geopolitical issues has changed more so now than, say, even back in those days. What's your thoughts? Because I just think your tungsten component could be the dark horse in this.
Well, certainly, having done all the work on that previous study, we end up having quite a significant tungsten project. So we don't have, because the value is shared between the two. Tin's a much bigger market. So it's, I think, nearly 400,000 tonnes consumed last year globally. Tungsten's like 120,000 tonnes, sort of almost a quarter. But we were numbers like we did in the open pit BFS. We were producing about 8% of the world's non-Chinese tungsten. So we are a big tungsten mine, but not a big tin mine. So that's and
relative to the market.
Relative to the markets, that's correct. So and you look at if you ever read up about tungsten, the history of it is a lot of it's around in the Cold War that we had previously. It's strategic metal. We had strategic stockpiles held by the US. And because tungsten's all about, not only is it about filaments, light bulbs, it's in semiconductors, it's about armaments. So it's armour piercing, armour plating, tungsten carbide drill bits. It's about steel hardening. So tungsten is cannot be substituted. Same density as gold, second hardest substance on the planet, and the highest melting metal. So you just don't replace that easily.
I don't think
China,
you can.
Sorry?
I don't think you can.
No, you can't. And certainly China controls it like it does the rare earth market. So the rest of the world's very keen to wean itself off that control, I suppose, monopolising the product. So it's interesting that now we've kind of got this Cold War happening again with China, and all of a sudden the world wants to go and distance itself and say, look, we want to get tungsten. That's why tungsten is not a critical mineral. All of a sudden we talk about maybe, should we get a tungsten stockpile again in the US, so we prepare ourselves. In high engineering applications, which countries like Japan and Germany, they specialise in that sort of high end sort of, that tungsten's required for that. So it's very much, we find, we're already getting calls from offtake parties who are interested because of our tungsten. We had that before. There's a lot of interest in tungsten, and certainly, to have a 100% Australian-owned asset is a rare thing, and certainly, tungsten's doubled in price since 2016. And I think it's been a slow burn, as you said before. It's it's sneaking up there, but I think critical, strategic, some of the names you can use on tungsten. But if you go back to the history, it used to be, it was strategic. Then the US just dumped. Once the Cold War, the Berlin Wall fell down, they just dumped it on the market. The price went down. I think we're well positioned, and I talk about Australia's next new tin discovery, but whether it has tungsten or not, I'm not sure. We may just find a tungsten skarn deposit. So that does exist on our Mount Ramsay project as well as a genuine possibility. So each one will have won't be a replica of what was there before, what we found before. It'll be something a little bit different, whether it's just tin or tungsten, it won't matter. Our plant can treat both. And that's the way we designed the plant.
I do think that tungsten is going to play a bigger role because, as you said, it's strategic and critical, and it's rare, as we know. You don't have a decent sized tungsten deposit, as I've sort of gone through it for years, when I was part of that game. It just doesn't exist, and people looked around and it just doesn't exist. So when this market kicks around, I think that's where you guys are going to get a huge leverage on that. I was just talking to another company, and they talk about kaolin, right? Kaolin is classic. This is an example how the market has changed. Is that kaolin is a 40 million or 45 million tonne per annum market. They're getting phone calls now from people saying, I need that amount just from one guy. So that is, and kaolin, as we know, we have a lot of this stuff, and it's never been sort of in the market. Well, it's too expensive and all this, but the fact that one guy has said, I want the whole year's annual production, to me, speaks volumes. So
yes.
There's going to be a flurry of activity in that section very soon, and I think that's just a sign of how things are moving now. And one of my reasons is saying that the market will kick on in the minerals market. I mean, it's for this very thing. There's a shift. There's a big shift. And if that was the case, if someone turned around and said, "Man, I need this amount more tungsten," where are they going to get it from?
Well, I'm thinking, we talked about there's free trade across the globe, across the world, and everyone's sort of going, well, hang on, I don't want to rely upon buying it from someone. I want to have my own, and I think that's where a lot of there's all of a sudden going, well, I'd rather get that supply from somewhere else, or I'd rather get either, if they can find their own, or get it with a more of a friendly party, if you like. And that scramble for commodities is across the whole. It's not just it's kaolin, it's tungsten, it's tin, it's copper. It's if we want to be part of most of that's driven by this decarbonisation of the economy, electrification of everything. That people want to do that in order to facilitate climate change and all the targets that we're trying to meet, then people will be scrambling, and all of a sudden the person who's got all the resources controls the market, and people they don't like that, so they want to try and de-risk that scenario. So there's a scramble for commodities worldwide.
I mean, a lot of people may not realise, but the Ukraine, Belarus, Russia is a big supply of coal into the European market because of what's happening. There's a big shortage of this stuff, and then It's sort of kind of thing that going forward, the new world situation. It's not about how many nuclear warheads you have. It's about what you have, because I'm not saying that nuclear warheads is not a deterrent, but as you said, right? It's about what you have and what you can do in sort of a non-war situation, right? And I guess touching on what you've said in terms of the electrification of the world, no emission world. What's your thoughts? Because we have talked about the fact that you potentially can play the green tin card and things like that, and look, it's a trade-off, right? It's a trade-off being mining. It's a trade-off being perception of green and etc. etc. What's your thoughts now that obviously you're going into this thing hands-on, right? Jumping in the water. What's your thoughts there?
Well, we're in Tasmania, the west coast of Tasmania. We're in the middle of a hydropower system. We sit between two dams, hydropower stations there with the dams, and Tasmania is already net zero emissions. So, when we talk about ESG, environmental stuff's done. So we're very well positioned with renewable energy. So that's what we'll be tapping into that for our mine, and obviously everything that's battery driven or electricity based will be all hydropower energy, because it's already going past our doorstep. Not to mention all the wind farms that they're building there on the west coast of Tasmania and the northwest there. So big tick in the box there. So and certainly when TMEC, the Tasmanian Mining and Energy Council, has done some work, and when you look at what we do versus when you go around the world, we because of doing net zero emissions, our carbon footprint is less than anywhere else in the world. So the best place to be mining is on the west coast of Tasmania, which is counterintuitive compared to some of the other groups that are sort of saying against mining there on the west coast of Tasmania, whereas here, in a global sense, this is a global problem, climate change. It's not a we can't say don't mine here because we don't want you to go and mine, for example, ripping out alluvial tin out of the DRC, or dredging the seafloor of Indonesia, or using child labour. Yeah. Myanmar, well, there's no rehabilitation happening in Myanmar. They're just ripping it out in the ground. So this is responsibly sourced. We've got the system, the permitting, so the governance is a big tick. We're on the west coast of Tasmania, where it's a mining community of 140 years. So we've got the social tick, like you can't keep everyone happy, but you've got to have a balance, to do what we need to do into building electric vehicles, to build battery driven, to reduce our emissions. You've got to think about where are the best places in the world to mine, and the west coast of Tasmania is one of the best places in the world. And with good practices, you can minimise your footprint. We're going underground. You do all that. You can rehabilitate. Today's rehabilitation, I can go back to the old workings. The area we've got is all regeneration, because they've gone through and had mined it 100 years ago at the surface, and it's just grown back. You've got 3 metres of rain a year. It grew back by itself. I was walking through a couple of weeks ago, looking at the old workings, and even since we were there drilling 8 years ago, it's starting to get hard to find the tracks and the roads. It's regrowing by itself. But by us mining and applying, today's best practice principles to rehabilitation, and we can have that growing. Put the topsoil back instead of just having these boulders that have been blasted from alluvial hydraulic mining, and do put the topsoil aside, plant the seed, do all that which you do today. Then all of a sudden the impact is almost zero, and so it's a. So I think the green tin angle, we tick all the boxes there, and we're not, people the hydropower is there anyway. We're going underground because we're trying to reduce the capex of the much smaller, higher grade, and a lot of that's we were doing already. But just the fact that the ESG side of things has become very prominent today is a coincidence as far as we're concerned for us. But we're in a great place. To support, I suppose, the world's push towards climate change and getting down to net zero. So we're going to be a big contributor in that space going forward.
Because, from my previous work in New Zealand, the studies showing that all alluvial gold mines, actually after they've gone through, they're actually more productive than they were before, because a lot of the clay has been taken out and the drainage has allowed regrowth, and everyone said that the best ground's the one where these guys have been, so in those valley floors and things like that. So rehab does have positive, as you said, in places where there's hardly any rain, they've been able to regrow things back. In Tasmania, I don't think it'll be that hard. You got so much rain, right?
Oh, exactly. I think if anyone looks at the old Cleveland tin mine, I had a look at that probably 15 years ago. You look on Google Earth, you can't hardly see it. The only part you can see is where there's this steep, fresh rock on the ROM pad, because it's such a high angle. It's the only thing that hasn't been taken back by the environment. It's just almost disappeared. And I suppose I got a little bit of a snapshot because that was mined in the 70s. So we're talking about nearly, back then it was 30, 40 years. Now it's 50 years. It's just grown back. So as a consequence, do that properly, take advantage of the climate you're in, and you can, rehabilitate and regenerate this very quickly. So your impact is, like I said, very quickly becomes zero.
I think, with all the ESG component and what you've got in terms of potential markets and stuff like that, this is a very, very interesting project to it's not going to be tomorrow. It'll take a while, obviously, but I think that's why I've always liked Mount Lindsay. But let's touch on your other projects that you've got. You've got the Kulin and the Golden Grove North and things like that. What's happening in those space?
Well, as you probably you would know, and maybe a lot of people are realising that we're an exploration boom now, and with impacts of COVID and that, it's everyone wants to do EM survey. So we're at that point at Kulin, we want to do an EM survey. We've got 3, and there's 2 of them are 20 kilometre long, one other one's 10 kilometre long. Will look like mafic, ultramafic complexes. So they'll have nickel, copper, PGE potential. We're in that same metamorphic belt extension of that holds Julimar. I don't think we're a Julimar type of target. I think, we don't know what type of target in, but we're speculating it could be more maybe Kambalda style. But, we need to do the work, and we've done, we added it, we doubled our land holding and push it up to 600 square kilometres. But we need to do the airborne EM to generate targets where to focus, if you like, and clearly, with that 4 RAB holes that were drilled, which are less than 25 metres deep, having up to 180 ppb platinum palladium from 1 metre below the surface, and I think we've got 12 metres at 0.16% nickel. So clearly we've got ultramafics there, so we've got the right ingredients. So really want to generate targets that we can focus on. So Kulin's really waiting for that at the moment. So quite an interesting early stage nickel copper PGE target. Golden Grove North, we've got an area we want to do some ground-based EM, because the area's of a size which you can't really do. You need a 3 kilometre long loop to do airborne EM, so we're going to do ground EM on that. We've got some interesting ultramafic as well as VMS style host rocks, which is to the west of Orcas. We're also looking at our work around Neptune there, which is I suppose within 10 kilometres of the Golden Grove mine. So so it's a bit of work going on then, mostly EM, and that just takes time to get that information done. So.
Okay. News flow, I guess, going forward, what's your planned activities? I know you've touched on a few here and there, but in a summary.
Well, look, the feasibility will generate results as we go along in terms of metallurgical results. Most of the drill results are out there. We've still got a little bit more to come back from the last bit on number 2 scan. So results from that, some outcomes I suppose from the met testing. Obviously, exploration at Mount Lindsay will hopefully reveals a new discovery but any news flow will come out of drilling there. So we'll have hopefully another rig. So if we get 2 rigs there, sort of pumping holes into those targets on a Renison mine sequence and along strike from Mount Lindsay. So we're pretty hopeful that will generate some good news flow. And then obviously clearly the maiden drilling program that Chalice is doing, and that Thor target down the Southwest project, news flow will come out of that. So next 3 months there I think will be quite exciting. Okay. We'll have both working together, and then if that generates something of interest, then follow up beyond that. So in terms of Kulin and Golden Grove North, probably the work's not going to happen until probably Q3 at the earliest, so maybe something towards the end of the year from those projects, and really we're looking to get something out in the market in terms of PFS, towards the end of the year, and Mount Lindsay. So there's plenty going on as always.
Yep, that's right. But look, Andrew, it's a great update. I think it's really good that we sort of touched on the feasibility, because I think I've got a lot of people asking, what are they doing? Are they going to be able to do it? But it's really the early stage. But I think the advantage is that you guys have gone through something similar like that before already. So I think the movement forward will be a lot smoother or a lot faster, and maybe less bumps than if you had sort of done this off the bat.
Yeah, we've already done a fair bit of work, and a lot of it, like I said, we're leveraging on $35 million spent already. So the resource basically is done. The met work, we're trying to improve what we've already got. So we've already got a good base. We know it works, and then we've got the mine design. We've done some work on underground, and we've done some in geotech. So look, you are exactly as you say. This is a second feasibility study we're heading into, not the first. So it'll move quite quickly, and hence we're looking to get PFS this year, BFS or DFS next year, and then looking to get the financing done and build shortly thereafter, and then go into production hopefully 12 months after that.
Yeah, and I think with the pricing and the market sentiment for tin, and I think tungsten following, it'll be a very, very interesting 12 months for you guys.
Absolutely.
But Andrew, as we finish, we're trying to finish every time with giving away coffee. So if working with Florence Drummond and Indigenous Women in Mining Resource Australia. So I think you've been given before.
Yes, and
here's more.
I've run out, so I need some more.
Oh, there you go. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks again.